Contact poi are one of, if not the most popular form factor for poi in the world today. Made by taking a hollow ball and attaching it to a rope and handle, contact poi are admired both for their simplicity of design as well as the wide variety of tricks and techniques that they make possible. If you've seen people spinning poi at all, it's highly likely you've seen them in action. But contact poi didn't start out this popular. In fact, they were originally considered a pretty niche curiosity only a handful of poi spinners even knew existed, let alone spun. So how did we get from niche props and a niche art form to becoming the most popular type of poi out there? Let's talk about it. Drex here from DrexFactor Poi, sharing with you the love of poi spinning and flow arts to benefit your body and brain. And in this video, I'm going to take you through some of the most important points in the history of contact poi, from their less than auspicious debut to launching countless small businesses, and in many ways bringing close to the tech poi era. Contact poi have had a pretty big impact on the things we spin. So let's talk about how. But before we dive in, I just want to give a quick shout out to the friends of the channel. Big thanks to Dark Monk, Fire Mecca, Flow Fests, Flow Toys, Pyroterra Light Toys, and Ultra Poi for helping to make the videos on this channel possible. You can learn more about all these awesome companies and the work they're doing to support flow artists like yourself by checking out the links down in the description of this video. So, check it out. This is the earliest set of contact poi I can find among the props that I still own. I've had these for years, and they're one of many sets that I've used in my career. I've been spinning contact poi off and on since at least 2009, and they've had a huge impact on my style and career in general. But before I tell you where they came from and how they became so popular, I do think it's a good idea to define some terms. See, contact poi refers to two different things depending upon context. The term can refer both to the specific form factor for the poi that involves a sphere connected to a handle via a rope, and it can refer to a specific style of poi or genre of tricks that involve parts of the poi other than the handle coming into significant contact with the performer's body. It can get a little confusing, but it is important to note the difference because contact poi as a prop took off before contact poi as a style did. But the style was a huge driver for the prop's popularity. To understand why, let's dive into what the poi world was like when contact poi were first introduced. Part 1. History. It's pretty rare that we can point to a single person or point in time as the origin of something that later became big in the flow arts, but contact poi is actually one such case, and it all comes down to an Irish poi spinner named Ronan McLoughlin. Way back in 2007, Ronan got the idea to drill out a vinyl stage ball and put a rope through it. He wanted to be able to use a poi like he saw many jugglers using clubs and use the entire length of the prop to create new tricks and techniques. The intention and hope was to create a set of poi that didn't need fire or LED to hold an audience's attention on stage. And this may actually require just a little bit of explanation if you're not already familiar with poi or juggling. Traditionally, in contemporary poi spinning, the prop is spun in such a fashion that only the handle really comes in contact with the body. The weighted end, or head, is made to spin around in various geometric shapes and rarely comes directly in contact with the body of the performer. But it's common among jugglers to engage with their prop in such a fashion that every part of it comes in contact with the performer's body. Ronan hoped to bring this vibe to poi spinning. The idea to use a club knob at the other end as a handle was a later suggestion made by Declan Mee, and thus the classic form factor of the contact poi we all know and love was born. And the reception from the poi world to this momentous invention was, well, pretty muted, all things considered. Ronan was using his poi for several years and even invented some of the basic techniques around contact poi rolls that we still use to this day, but few other poi spinners followed his lead. To the best of my knowledge, Home of Poi became the first company to explicitly market a set of poi with Ronan's setup, but even then, they referred to them as pendulum poi because at the time, Ronan's work with pendulums and stalls was far more popular than his contact work. This also, incidentally, was when static rope first entered the contact poi world as well. I remember at a festival called Fire Drums in 2010, people challenged themselves and others to balance the tether of the poi as it was being held. Tether balances became popular before contact rolls did. Some spinners did notice early on that the form factor really made stalls and plane breaking pop, but by and large, the reception to those first generation contact poi was pretty quiet. So what changed? A guy came along by the name of Cyrille Humen. Cyrille originally made his name in the tech poi world by publishing an influential treatise on poi geometry, not just outlining new performance theories on the presentation of poi, but also discussing a wide range of patterns possible to create with the prop. This included the first published representation I'm aware of for the pattern that would later become known as Zan's diamond. But Cyrille made a really hard pivot toward the end of the 2000s, and he had his eyes set on those funny poi that Ronan had invented, because he could see enormous potential in them. In 2009, Cyrille released a video called Mana Poi, and it is no exaggeration to say that this one video ignited the entire contact poi revolution. Unfortunately, I cannot show it to you because it was long ago blocked due to a copyright claim on its background music, but I can at least describe to you some of what was in it. Rather than exploring more geometric patterns, Cyrille adopted a wide variety of body rolls from contact juggling and throws from club juggling to poi. This was poi being used in a fashion that was revolutionary and radically reimagined what the prop was capable of. And the impact of this video was instantaneous and overwhelming. Within a year or two, absolutely everybody I knew had a set of contact poi. I remember telling a friend who ran a prop making company that he should look into producing sets, but he insisted it was just a fad and would probably run its course before he could have a prototype ready. Which is absolutely absurd given what happened next in the prop market, but hold tight. We'll get there. So that's where contact poi came from, but why exactly did they get so popular so fast, and why did they become the default form factor for poi even among people who don't do contact rolls? Well, to understand that, we need to talk about what made this change in form factor appealing to poi spinners, all poi spinners in the first place. Part 2. Aesthetics. Though contact rolls were one of the most important applications for contact poi, they weren't originally the ones that got them noticed. It's relatively easy to learn many of the basics of poi. I can teach most people a butterfly or a reel turn inside of a half hour, but getting good at it requires a lot more time and patience. Especially early on, tricks like stalls and flowers can look pretty sloppy, and it takes a long time to get good technique down. But contact poi represent a kind of cheat code to improve the appearance of many poi tricks quickly and easily. Because contact poi focus the attention of the viewer on the tip of the poi rather than the full length of it, they're very forgiving of unrefined technique. Flowers, hybrids, weaves, and isolations have a much cleaner presentation when your focus centers on the end of the poi, regardless of the skill level of the performer. You can see the difference when I show the same trick with both contact poi and sock poi. Seeing the entire length of the poi exposes a multitude of small flaws and inconsistencies, but contact poi papers over them by making the sections of the poi that would tell on the performer seem more or less invisible. And so, contact poi had an advantage that made them attractive even to poi spinners who weren't interested in performing contact rolls. It also didn't hurt that all the big names in the poi world were switching over to the form factor, and that made them fashionable to own, regardless of what style you used. Regardless of the reason why, once contact poi were widely adopted, their unique aesthetic properties wound up exerting an enormous influence on the style and vocabulary of the art in general. When contact poi were first popularized, the dominant genre was tech poi, an artistic movement that centers around creating mathematically precise patterns based on a type of curves called roulettes. But because contact poi focused attention on the end of the prop, poi spinners began to specialize in tricks that benefit most from that point of focus around the head. In particular, stalls, point isolation stalls, and pendulums all benefit from this form factor. These are all moves that center around something called a 0 point, a technique in which the poi is brought to a complete stop for a moment. And thus, poi spinning began to shift away from a style that keeps the poi moving constantly to one in which stopping and pausing the prop on occasion is much more commonly practiced. And this makes sense. If you have a form factor that focuses the audience's attention on a single point, then it's probably going to select for tricks that benefit from working around that single point as well. But that wasn't the only shift that contact poi encouraged. We kind of take for granted now that tosses and throws are so deeply integrated into poi spinning. But when I was first coming up, they were comparatively rare. Most sets of poi had loop handles that went around your fingers, anchoring them down for the duration of your spin. Contact poi were the first sets of poi that defaulted to having a ball-shaped handle that allowed you to quickly and easily release them. This encouraged a whole generation of poi spinners to explore what would happen when you let go of the handle. Where precisely could you take the poi when it wasn't always attached to you? Ronan succeeded in his intention of creating poi that could be treated in the same way that jugglers used clubs, and the result has been a generation of artists who've sought to adapt juggling techniques to the poi world, including toss patterns and rolls. This artistic movement is called manipulation, and it's been the dominant approach to spinning poi now for more than a decade. But none of that would have been possible without a radical change in the market of poi, too. After all, you can't have a form factor achieve widespread adoption without people being able to acquire sets of them, or plenty of artists to inspire people to adopt them, right? And that's why I think one of the most important, though least visible aspects of contact poi's influence isn't just in the work people have created with them, but how they have altered the way poi worked as a product in and of themselves. Part 3. The market. If you are of a certain age, then you can probably remember a time when you really only had two options for acquiring your first set of poi. You could purchase them from an overseas vendor and wait weeks for them to arrive, or create your own set by repurposing a variety of materials you had at hand. Even poi purchased from those overseas vendors tended not to be very high quality. LED poi broke down constantly, chains would fatigue and break, or socks would stretch out into flaccid lumps. And the barrier to entry for starting a company yourself was really high. Purchasing supplies, much less manufacturing poi in volume, was a daunting task. So most of us just kind of made our peace with what solutions we could hack together ourselves. But contact poi were a little different. It wasn't hard to acquire the materials for them. You could go down to any hardware or camping store and purchase rope. And wholesale vendors for stage balls and club knobs were comparatively easy to find. Even better, all these materials were very, very cheap. The raw materials for a set of contact poi rarely ran you more than about $15 to $20 per unit, and the labor necessary to put them together was pretty trivial, all things considered. Drill a hole in the ball, thread the rope through, tie off a knot through the handle, and you're done. But it was also a pretty unique situation for a wide variety of artists. See, there is a big question that jumps up every time a flow artist decides they want to spin full-time. How exactly do you make money? How do you pay the rent? How do you put food on the table? How do you make this thing you're so passionate about pay for itself so you can devote the time that you want to it? Traditionally, that answer has kind of defaulted to performance, and certainly the first generation of online poi stars leaned heavily on paid performance to subsidize their content and travel. But as that generation turned over to the tech poi generation of the late 2000s, we ran into a little bit of a snag. Most of those artists had deeply engaged and passionate online audiences, but the ways they practiced and explored poi weren't a good match for the kinds of gigs that the generation before them had relied on. So how could they monetize those audiences in an era before online ads and Patreon? For a lot of people, contact poi turned out to be the answer. Cheap, easy to make, surging demand, and low barriers to admission meant that contact poi didn't just launch a generation of artists, they also launched a generation of businesses. I was one of many artists who set up operations in their living room, manufacturing contact poi and selling them through online storefronts. Many people were all too eager, not just to support an artist that they respected, but also to use the same props that they did. This is a relationship as old as Air Jordans. It also didn't hurt that there was something of a personal connection that could be achieved through buying an artist's poi. It reinforced a perception of mutual aid for scrappy underdog artists pushing an underground art forward. There was something about this arrangement that made everybody involved feel good about themselves. And the result of this was that for the first time, the poi world truly had a professional class of innovators and artists. People whose sole job it was to come up with new tricks and ideas that would impress others, and whose time spent practicing was subsidized through their prop sales. The work they posted to YouTube or social media wasn't just cool ideas that they'd put out there every once in a while when they could work it around other gigs. It was explicitly the point, and more often than not, a form of advertising for their poi in and of itself. Contact poi didn't just revolutionize the aesthetics of poi, they also revolutionized the business and culture of poi too. They made an enormous transformation in the art possible a decade and a half ago and supported a generation of artists as they sought to turn poi into a full-time pursuit or career. But of course, the boom couldn't last, and now there are precious few independent contact poi manufacturers. So why did that happen, and what does the future have in store for contact poi? Part 4. The morning after. Because the contact poi market was so competitive, it wound up chewing up and spitting out a lot of would-be entrepreneurs. Many struggled to scale their operations to meet demand. After all, the majority of these small businesses consisted of only a single person or a small team, and past a certain volume, it became impossible to keep up with all the orders. Work became overwhelming for many, and more than a few noticed that the time commitment necessary to make all of those poi was taking away from time spent practicing with the prop. And that had originally been the point, hadn't it? But that wasn't the only challenge. The barriers to admission were a little too low, as it turned out, and the bigger problem was that contact poi were actually so simple that they were largely undifferentiated. It was nearly impossible to tell, even sometimes when holding them in your hands, who had manufactured a given set of contact poi, and that made establishing a unique brand in the market quite difficult. With a flood of small vendors coming into the market, price competition was fierce, and lots of vendors wound up selling their poi either at or below cost to try and stay competitive. This inevitably meant that the great majority of these small vendors went under relatively quickly, and there was fierce competition among those that stayed open. A glut of low-end products certainly didn't help, and soon popular artists began searching for ways to improve on the basic contact poi design to achieve better performance. There were a dizzying array of handles, head sizes, and rope materials that soon came to compete for attention and dollars. Pretty soon, you had to stock dozens of different options to be able to sell to anybody rather than just one specific niche. Some clever manufacturers started producing balls in exclusive colors that only their shop offered. That helped for a while, but ultimately, control of the market went to those who could keep up with demand for options. Different fads for handle and tether types worked their way through the poi world, and smaller vendors just couldn't keep up. In the end, the market consolidated around a handful of bigger manufacturers who could afford to take a lower profit margin on their contact poi and had the means to stock all the latest options. The era of the artist-led independent company was over. And in the end, the monopoly contact poi held over the poi consciousness broke too. Once exclusively the domain of broke beginners repurposing old clothes, sock poi reemerged as a stylish and underappreciated form factor driven by sleek and technically refined artists on both sides of the Atlantic. Katya Stakhanova, Ivan Gorbanov, and a wide variety of other Russian and Eastern European spinners demonstrated just how good body tracers could look with poi that invited you to look at the entire prop. Programmable poi radically shifted the prop's position in the performance landscape and quickly became must-have products for any professional. But the form factor forbade all the contact roles that had become popular as a result of the manipulation boom. So, contact poi lost their position as the prestige prop of choice. While contact poi may have lost its position as the default form factor of poi, it remains a popular and essential form factor whether somebody performs contact roles with them or not. Despite the collapse of the market and competition from other form factors, it remains so popular that it is synonymous with poi as a prop in the imaginations of many. So where does that leave us? Part 5. Parting Thoughts. Contact poi played an enormously powerful role in my own career as an artist, not just in terms of the work that I produced, but also in my ability to make a living doing it for many years. I was lucky enough to be coming up at a time when it was possible for me to transition into being a full-time poi spinner, and contact poi was undoubtedly a big driver of my being able to take that risk. The innovations of Ronan, Cyrille, and countless other artists who've expanded the vocabulary of the prop through contact work has become ubiquitous and deeply integrated into the art form. To this day, a huge percentage of the work being done to develop new tricks and techniques still focus on the contact poi form factor, and that trend doesn't show any sign of changing anytime soon. Contact poi have come a long way since Ronan first attached a rope to a stage ball nearly 20 years ago. They've driven creativity, commerce, and culture, and they've had a radical influence on the art of poi that persists to this very day. I hope you've enjoyed exploring those impacts with me, and they give you some ideas and inspiration of your own. Maybe one of you out there watching will one day create a little curiosity of your own that spins out to turn the broader poi world over on its head. I can't wait to see it. Do you own a set of your own contact poi? What do you enjoy about them? What impact have they had on your spinning? Leave me a comment and let me know. Also be sure to leave a like, share, and subscribe to help other people find this video and to help my channel grow. Video essays like this take a lot of work. From research and writing to shooting and editing, videos like this one would not be possible without my amazing supporters on Patreon. In particular, I'd love to give a shout out to my Flow patrons who are listed on screen right now. Thank you all so much for your very generous support. And if you dug this video and you'd like to support the creation of more like it, you can join those Flow patrons in making it possible by signing up for my Patreon over at patreon.com/DrexFactorPoi. I'll leave a link down in the description as well as up in the cards. There you can get access to a whole host of awesome rewards, but more than that, you'll be supporting me in my mission of bringing poi spinning and flow arts to the whole wide world. Thank you in advance. Want to learn more about the impact Cyrille Humen had on the poi world and why his approach with contact poi was so revolutionary? I did a whole video essay on his career and influence that I'll link to down in the description as well as up here on screen. Thanks so much for watching, and make sure to get out and flow yourself today. I'll see you with a new video real soon. Take care now. Peace.